We're so happy to have Dr. Homishashik here with us. We just had to listen to Dr. Duyan's video series where she talks a little bit about her experience coming to the United States and her research. And in it, she mentioned the word acculturation, acculturative stress. And I thought that Dr. Kimberly Homishashik might be able to share with us a little bit more about that because of the work that she herself has done. So Dr. Homishashik, why don't you go ahead and share with us the work that you have done and what acculturation means and how it might impact somebody who is migrating to the country?
Sure, happy to provide that background and context. And just quickly, in terms of the work I've done, I have started some preliminary work on looking at the immigration journey and how that affects the identity of Chinese Jamaican immigrants in the United States. And so acculturation definitely was a factor that I looked at in this population. And what is the word acculturation for the layman out there who, these terms, you can hear culture shock or something like that, and you can understand maybe what that means definition wise. And so acculturation specifically as a term in the psychological research, I like the definition that Redfield, Linton, and Herskovitz proposes, where it's this phenomena that occurs as a result of contact between culturally different groups. And you can look at that within a historical context or contemporary context when it comes to migration. And so Dr. Duyan talked about assimilation, which is one of 4 possible strategies that is also proposed by another theorist who worked in the field of acculturation, John Berry. And so there's 4 different types of acculturation strategies. And the first being what Dr. Dugan mentioned, assimilation. And so you can think about the term assimilation, but what it specifically means as one of 4 acculturation strategies is how much a person either identifies with the US or the local culture, which she was talking about the United States culture, and how much they identify with their own heritage culture. And they can be high and low in each of these dimensions. So people who use the assimilation strategy tend to consider their culture of origin not as sort of salient or important, or don't identify with it a lot, and identify mainly with the new culture. They're said to be using a more assimilationist sort of strategy. So they don't tend to maintain or participate in activities of their own culture, and they are mostly participating and adopting the characteristics of the host culture, which is in her case, the American culture. Also, the other 3 strategies to speak of them is separation. So this would be persons who they are not learning about or adapting into the new culture or the American culture, for if we just call this the other culture, the American culture, and they are, but they value a lot their own heritage, their own culture, and they really want to hold on to that. So you could kind of see them, they fall in the separation strategy. Then another strategy would be people who would fall in the bucket of marginalization, in which they neither identify with the heritage culture and they don't feel strongly attached or aligned with the new culture, the American culture. So they're kind of not really in any sort of the 2 major buckets. And then finally, you have the integration strategy, which is people who seek to, maintain, preserve, be connected to their heritage culture, and also learn from, interact with, identify with, maybe to some degree, or use the dominant culture. And they're kind of blending the 2, and they're using it in different settings, whether that's with peers or in the workplace. They tend to find this acculturation strategy to be more beneficial to psychological health, rather than the other strategies, which can be, associated with either more depression or anxiety, or poor well-being. So for those who use the integration strategy, we're found to have the strongest mental health outcomes.
That's really helpful. So basically, acculturation is something that happens when your culture or the culture that you're from is interacting with this new culture that you're in. And there are different ways to deal with that interaction. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's exactly right. It's the phenomena that comes up as two distinct cultural streams come into contact. And you can push that even further if the sending society or the migrants host culture has, already has more than one culture. So, just to speak about my own research, to speak about Chinese Jamaicans coming from Jamaica to the United States, they're already identifying with multiple streams in their home country, that of the Jamaican society, which was also a colonial Commonwealth country with elements of British culture. And then they have also the Chinese culture that's melded into a melting pot in the Jamaican culture itself. So they already kind of are having, maybe three streams of cultural heritage to draw from, and then they come to the United States. And even the United States itself is also a melting pot. We have many different segments or different American identities, and so and also depending on where you live in the United States, a lot of the Chinese Jamaicans also ended up in Florida, for example, in Miami specifically, where there was a large Latin American population as well. And so it was just interesting to look at the streams of of ethnicities and cultures that they're interacting with, and how that shapes their identity.
That's great. Now, you're mentioning something that ties into something that Dr. Duyan introduced, and it's this idea that you are told that you are not who it is that you are, or who it is that you believe yourself to be. Can you, and you're talking about this idea of being Chinese Jamaican, which I imagine is a foreign concept to a lot of people who might be listening to this, unless you're from the Caribbean and you understand the melting pot that is there. Can you talk a little bit about this? What is the phrase that you'd use for it?
Yes, so there's a term which was great, because as I was doing this literature search for my dissertation, I didn't know my experience was there was a category for that in the psychological literature, which is that of identity denial. So that is when you as an individual is not recognized as a member of the group that you say you belong to, or that you say you are a member of. And so, either because they, the people looking at you say you don't resemble a prototypical member of this group. And so they call your identity into question. And so, that can also have effects on you, never truly either being seen for who you say that you are. Sometimes there's even identity prescription, which is when people already put an identity upon you that they think would better suit what they think in their mind matches what they see you as. So, there's the denial and then the prescription. And of course, that can just be, can be very isolating and exclusionary, and almost make you question, who are you then if you can't be who you say you are in relation to other people. So yeah, that's identity denial, when they don't recognize you as a member of the group you say you are, and identity prescription, when they put a particular identity label on you that just fits their schema rather than what you share is your own social identity.
It's so interesting because when I went to college, I was a part of a majority group. So Caribbean nationals who had grown up in the Caribbean. And we were interacting with persons who were second generation Caribbean immigrants, or immigrants who were also students who were coming in who also identified as Caribbean nationals. And there was a tension between that group, because those who had come from the Caribbean, who had grown up in the Caribbean, felt as though they could prescribe the identity of others. And in so doing, they were denying that the persons who said that they were from the Caribbean had that identity. Are there mental health impacts of that kind of tension or interaction or labeling?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember actually being an immigrant myself from Jamaica in college. And I think I find, if I can think back, I find myself even guilty of thinking, well, she's not really that Jamaican because, it's just her parents are from there, but she never grew up there, and like, whereas me and my friends were the ones coming in. And I think that could be harmful for that person who wants to their parents are raising them in the home with the food and the music and the language, and they want to learn more about it. So, for someone to, again, put that identity denial on them, or just say, you're not really that, whatever they say they are, fill in the blank, I can imagine that it can cause some confusion. And over time, if you're not able to, you don't have that freedom to take on that label and that identity, either you either lose it if you kind of give up that fight, or like that piece of yourself is just, it just feels like something you can only be truly you in certain circles. And so I guess over time, if that were to persist, thinking in different spaces, like, with in your workplace, or I could just imagine that being a little bit, like a piece of you is kind of like died, and then, you can't really truly unlock that piece of yourself. And so it's just, self-expression is limited. Maybe people, you don't tend to, the conversations that you have with people tend to just fall to a stilt, and maybe it can cost, some things with employment or just social relationships, just feeling never understood, never really, like anyone really gets you.
That's great. Thank you. So many of us have experienced it. And so this is really helpful. So just to sum up, something happens when you are entering with your culture into a new culture. And that is acculturation. It's a phenomenon. And you have many different ways to, or it may not be something you even have control over, but people choose different pathways or fall into different pathways based on the acculturative process. And secondly, we talk a little bit about identity denial and identity prescription, which we need to just be mindful and really kind to other people, it sounds like, when we're interacting with people who are different from us, because it may actually be harmful to be telling somebody else that they're not who they say they are. It's great to have a listening posture and be thoughtful. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Homishashek. It was really lovely to have you.